Naples, Italy, Cappella San Severo. An interesting Rococo statue abides here, supposedly made by the 18th century sculptor Francesco Querolo. Art historians assure us that this masterpiece was carved using manual tools and techniques out of a single piece of marble. Now, marble is a relatively very soft stone, and it's got those kind of veins in it that are so fragile that this net would be a miracle that it survives even without anything hitting it for centuries. And so the art historians, to make their story more believable, assure us that the artist was rubbing it with pumice stone to carve this net, because obviously by hitting it with a chisel it would break in no time, probably with the very first hit. Well, I happen to have both marble and pumice at home, so I quickly conducted an experiment. I tried to carve something, anything, or even a scratch into the marble with the help of a pumice, and the results were much faster than I expected. The pumice wore out in no time. There were no visible scratches on the marble itself. So the pumice story I don't believe, but let's assume that the sculptor was rubbing it with some harder stone. Actually, that wouldn't make much difference at all, because no matter with what you rub it, the point is, once you start applying pressure in any form, by hitting it with a chisel or by rubbing it with anything, it is gonna break. It's marble. And not only that, the net has got few layers. If the work was done, and it is a really fine work, really with manual tools, how would the sculptor make the inner layers? Those are carved as well. In some cases he wouldn't have a place to access the inside of this net, what to speak of working around with tools and stuff. I shared my doubts in the forms of a question with actually 15 art experts, art historians, and asked them what they think about this. Of course, most of them simply avoided the question. Two of them did reply, but their information was not to the point, not really relevant to the question. And when I tried to press them further, pinpointing the exact problem, marble breaks, you can't hit it, you can't rub it without putting pressure on it. Finally, he just said, I mean, why would you expect that we know each and everything? Such an expectations of yours are by themselves unreasonable. Well, they would be unreasonable indeed if they were honest and were openly admitting that there are lots of white spots in the history of art, instead of dishonestly pretending that they have figured out everything and we know all about the techniques used few centuries ago, supposedly. In other words, I'm asking if the history of art, or at least some parts of it, was created to really inform us about what techniques, for example, were used in the past, or was it created to partially endorse the false history of humanity with false history of art? In the gold collection of the Hermitage Museum, some of the items cannot be even viewed with simple eyesight. That is why they are placed behind big magnifying glasses. Some of them would need even two magnifying glasses behind one another to view the actual details. The most famous and most skillful jewelers on the planet have been attempting to make copies, for example, of these famous earrings called Feodosovsky Sergi, and all of them have failed completely. Even the world famous maker of the Fabergé eggs, Peter Carl Fabergé, even he failed utterly and completely. What you see on the screen now are his famous masterpieces. So even after this failure, still the textbooks continue to assure us that such a fine gold work, for example, like the one of the Scythians, which were surely connected with the culture of the survivors, is a work of barely civilized people who could not unable to organize themselves within a country or anything like that, and constantly traveling with their cattle in the search of lush grass for their cattle. And that's all basically the way they picture it, just a nomadic hut and simple people. Then how could they produce these things that we cannot replicate? This is such a fine Scythian work. It is seen only under magnifying glass. And now this is a really very recent finding of Nikolai Subotiv in the area of Arkaim. These are quartzite stones, something like a star with six rays or something like that. Quartzite by itself is a very hard stone, and how did they shape it by itself is quite a question, but the most mysterious are these holes in them. Now, drill holes are nothing new on the megaliths all around the world, but these are not even round, so it wasn't some rotating drill. How did they make it? Moreover, these holes are quite deep, and their sides are very, very smooth. With our current technology, the only way we could produce this is with laser. So interesting. How did they do it? And or maybe they knew the recipe of quartzite geopolymer as well? Ukraine, Crimea, Palace Vorontsovsky. The entire palace complex is made out of diabase stone. Diabase is particularly hard variety of stone. For example, in the Aswan quarries in Egypt, few diabase stones are left for the tourists, the enthusiastic tourists who wish to try for themselves how does it feel to try to work with a granite using another stone. Now you can imagine how easy would it be to handle this diabase stone with just simple tools, the one we are told the builders had. The official history tells us that this palace was built 200 years ago by simple villagers, locals, and of course conveniently failed to provide a demonstration. How could this happen in reality? Yes, really, a demonstration would be the most interesting thing. It will be interesting to find out how many months or years would take a worker to prepare one of the stones, if that is possible at all. And then there is this statue in this palace. It is as if alive. Actually, it doesn't look anything special from far away, and only when you are told to get near and see the details, then you understand what is the miracle about it. Amazing details are seen there, like for example the stitches on its dress, or the individual fibers or threads out of which its dress has been made. It doesn't make much sense. Why would one go such in detail, also in the places where it is not visible? Supposedly made by an artist about whom we know almost nothing, Quintilio Corbellini. He must have been a great genius, and yet no information about him. Can somebody reproduce this nowadays using just simple manual tools? I doubt it. Or maybe his sons and grandsons, and I don't know how many generations ahead will need to finish it. We can make this nowadays only with a 3D printer, and also we would need the 3D scanner, a very high quality one. While the Corbellini character was producing them, I mean, like on a production line. It's not only this one, another one, almost identical, was sold on an auction in London. Both are very similar, but it seems when they were scanning the girl with that scanner, it just moved within a few minutes or something, and there is a slight difference in the folds of her dress, and also a few of her hairs have moved a bit. On this image, you see the comparison between the girl from the uh, Palace Voronezh and the one sold in the Bonham's auction in London. Well, I find it increasingly difficult to believe just any art historian. I think they should be first asked to replicate the work that they're commenting on, and then they can be considered an authority on it. And by the way, I'm not at all highly impressed by the so-called art created by these very same modern art historians who are much more advanced than their historic counterparts. I'm neither impressed by the fineness of their so-called art, neither by its so-called message, if there is any message at all in this. Last cities that honored the gods of the survivors and were still built with techniques inherited from them, they all had triumphal arches, and many of them are still there. This collection of triumphal arcs from all around the world is compiled by Mikhail Volk. Probably very few would guess that there could be technology employed in these arcs that we could not replicate nowadays, but it turns out we are so pathetic we cannot replicate even a relatively small thing like this. Now in Moscow they try to replicate some parts of the arc for the purpose of repair, but they had to just make the project smaller and make the new arc without certain elements. And during the inauguration ceremony of the new arc, some journalists were quite persistent, and actually a very valuable piece of information leaked out of some of the people who participated in the project of the renovation of the arc. It turned out that we cannot replicate this arc because there is a large cast iron monument on the top of it. When they tried to cast new parts to substitute some of the old ones, it came out that the full thing is too heavy and the arch won't be able to support it. And then of course the question came up, but then how come the arch is supporting this composition, the old one? It is also made of cast iron. And then the sad truth transpired that actually we are unable to make statues of such quality. When we cast iron, it is always very thick, and the full thing ends up very heavy, while in the past they knew how to make it very thin. They calculated, and it seems that the thickness of the original monument is some 1 centimeter, and we cannot reproduce that. So these persistent journalists, they were pressing hard on some of the participants of the restoration project, and this is how much they could get out of them. Those specialists said, well, the old statue was made of cast iron of some special recipe, some old recipe that is now lost. Recipe is lost? I really don't believe this. Supposedly this ark was built some 200 years ago. If they're telling me that, for example, an ancient recipe has been lost about the formulas that they were giving to their domestic baby griffins 84,000 years ago, that I can believe. But casting iron, this tradition hasn't been broken during the last long 200 years. Or at least it shouldn't be forgotten in a natural way, unless artificial circumstances were created and people adopted a low quality cast iron. There must have been some special reason for such a downgrade. And also finding out the exact formula of a particular piece of cast iron is a very common procedure that usually takes some 20 minutes. It is used all the time in the places where cast iron is being worked with. There is nothing complex about it. Are they trying to convince us that it didn't strike anybody to perform such a quick and easy test? Most likely they did easily find out the composition of the old cast iron, but didn't want to make it, like public, so people don't start using advanced technologies. But why they didn't use it themselves? Even only for the purpose of restoration only. Well, either there was some very rare or maybe even not earthly elements in it. That's one not likely, but also a possibility. Another possibility is that after finding the actual formula, everything was just frozen and made secret so that people can't get advantage of a better technology. And yet another possibility is they found out the formula, but it is not just a question of a formula. You need the actual casting technique and equipment. Or maybe a fourth possibility that I cannot think about at the moment. But in any case, the sad truth is that just a few hundred years ago, still the last remnants of the knowledge of the survivors was taken and is being taken away from us in broad daylight. This is what we call a great achievement, the first anthropomorphic design and so on, our first advanced diving suit. Or at least we're supposed to think that it was advanced for the times that it appeared, some 130 years ago. Just compare it with the quality of the knight's armor that was created a century before that. The superiority of the quality of the old stuff is visible even to non-professionals at once. This is what the encyclopedia of every good ship tells us about the dawn of steel working. And yet, decades before that, the impressive buildings of the St. Isaac's Cathedral and the palace, which now houses the Hermitage Museum in St. Petersburg, are built with absolutely amazing and strong steel frames. Just look at this construction. It is obviously a professionally made product by people who have tradition and knowledge in steel working. And I wonder why the stainless steel I buy in the shop gets rusty very quickly nowadays. Well, not all, but at least the one made in China surely does. This steel work is of high professional quality, and yet it appears in a country which at that time was extremely backwards according to mainstream history. And anyway, this technology should not have existed, and this was decades ago according to mainstream history. Most likely actually these buildings were there long before that. And more research from Alexei Kungurov. He will be one of the main characters after a few episodes. Probably his discoveries will be the most shocking out of all new things that you will hear in the Survivor series. But at this point, he's just turning our attention about this to these triangular structures which are used in mapping. Maps need to be anchored, so to say, to some real points on the ground from where the calculations and the map grid would begin. And he started finding very ancient looking structures of this sort, and then he even found photos, very old photos, dating at the time when this system supposedly didn't even exist. The level of radiation in Moscow city is far above average. Many blame it on nuclear wastes. According to other sources, that is all cleaned up now, but if we believe this map of the radiation contamination, if the map is correct, it seems to form kind of a round, and the center is right in the middle of the city. Many people automatically assume that the cause for this contamination could be only some very recent activity, because the mass media is leading us to believe that nuclear weapons are only a very recent discovery. But other possibilities exist as well. If we read the stories of the mainstream history, we hear about Napoleon trying to invade Russia, and after the Russians held a few victories over the army of Napoleon, they suddenly decide to just withdraw and furthermore leave their capital absolutely vacant for Napoleon to just come in. That was the order given by the field marshal, to just run away and leave the capital without any battle. And despite everybody's protests, because it was obviously stupid, that was the situation. And after that, the strange and illogical things continue. Some sort of grand fire devastates Moscow in a very mysterious way. Of course, nobody has invested interest in this fire, and officially the reasons and the cause is not yet sure. And the cartoon continues afterwards. Although Napoleon went to war to conquer Russia and Moscow, he was given it for free, and then he ran away, although he had it without any battle or anything. But as usual, the best way to spot lies and liars is when they get inconsistent and start contradicting it themselves. For example, this fire turned especially the center of Moscow into just rubble. How can a fire turn huge stone buildings into rubble? This doesn't happen. The skeleton remains when actual fires occur. And also in the concise version of this history, like for example the one in the school books, they provide an easy explanation. Well, it was all wooden and so it burned. But when you read the detailed version, you understand that it has nothing to do with the concise. The very center, because the fire was exactly circular, by the way, the very center was the main Kremlin, the very center of the city, where wooden construction was not allowed for a long time already before the fire, due to fire hazards. Exactly. And indeed, the very name of the city at that time, and also it transpires from the paintings of the artists who painted whatever they saw, was Moscow made of white stone. It's like a phrase. What has remained left from this white stone Moscow? This is when they dig the streets for a canal, for example, we get a glimpse. There is a layer of white stone. Some claim to have tested it and verified that it is actually geopolymer. But in any case, This was not an ordinary fire, and there are diaries and other documents left from the witnesses at that time. Well, listen to what they say. This is from the diary of a French officer of the Napoleon army. At that time, meaning the time when the fire exploded, we happened to be in Kremlin, and our room had a panorama to the full city. We were awakened by a very strange light that illuminated the full city. Light of ball descended, and first it illuminated the graceful and noble, I'm translating, outlines of the buildings. And then the palace simply fell apart and collapsed. Well, this is an unusual fire, I must say. The image that you see now is an actual photo from nuclear tests. So it really looks like an accurate description of some sort of weapon of this type. Now, this is not the only witness account of this type. It was discovered in year 2010 and again woke up this question again in the circles of Russia, but there were doubts about it even before. This was from the diary of Philippe de Ségur, found in year 2010 in Paris. Well, as the story continues, according to these diaries and according to mainstream history as well, is the army of Napoleon doesn't want to enjoy its victory that got, without reason, and they head back. But how do they head back? All of a sudden, sicknesses start after the fire. People, I mean, even the officers call them just the devilish, they don't understand them. First of all, most of the people die straight away, and the small portion that survives suffer terrible blood, diarrhea, extreme weakness, feeling barely alive, their hair and nails fall off, and so on. Everything is absolutely consistent with the typical aftermath of a nuclear weapon or something very similar to it. And by the way, this so-called fire had an amazingly circular shape. It's a devastation area and originated exactly in the stone Kremlin, and amazingly enough could spread through ditches that at places are 34 meters wide. These are earth trenches around the Kremlin and 13 meters deep. An ordinary fire shouldn't be able to cross that. And interestingly enough, after the fire, these ditches stopped existing. They were full of rubble. Just imagine the scale of this explosion. Ordinary fires don't shift stones in such quantity. If indeed Moscow was bombed by nuclear weapon or something of that sort at that time, then who did it? Well, there are so many parties out there in the rich ecosystem of the universe that temper with the history of human race. I don't know which one of them exactly could have done it, but I guess it wasn't a very benevolent and kind one, because kind entities don't kill in such manner. As far as we can judge from the diaries of the actual people on the ground, none of them had any clue who did it. And most of them seem to have been thinking that it was the other party that the party that they are fighting is causing this to them, which is very normal because in order to organize normal humans to go to war, there is a need to convince them that this has some sort of local reasons. Like, for example, at this very moment, a war is going on in Syria, and in most of the mass media outlets, it is always presented as some sort of local problem. And most people are indeed convinced that wars are fought for resources. What resources? Who has won any resources out of the so many recent wars we have seen with our own eyes? Full countries are trashed. like Libya, uh, Iraq, just total destruction. Did anybody get any resource benefit out of that? For example, like the American people who pay heavy taxes to fund all this. So in the same way, the actual parties on the ground during the war with Napoleon, they had some sort of their own ideas of why and what they're fighting for. And a third party took advantage of the convenient for them situation of military action going on and dumped the bomb to serve their own purposes. Now, the Russian field marshal who actually ordered the evacuation of Moscow could have had some information that something will be happening, and that's why he might have issued this highly controversial evacuation order. And then the Kremlin, as we know it, was rebuilt now with a lower quality and lower technology, because the closer we get in the timeline, the more we lose the knowledge of the survivors and pay attention to the pieces that were reused in the construction of Kremlin. These are the white stone pieces with leaves and other ornaments, survivor style art, probably on geopolymer. And also on this image you see a Romaic style column, remains of a column, top maybe. And still textbooks assure the innocent children that actually this is some sort of art that originated in Europe, and the people in those area didn't know anything about it at that time. In rare cases, few white stones still remain in the foundations of some older buildings. And while digging for building foundations, this Romaic style objects surface now and then, and we also see interesting stuff on the paintings of the city before it was demolished by this explosion. Like, for example, the roofs are often covered with metal plates. We do use a lot that nowadays because we have actually sophisticated machinery to produce them. But such a production would have been impossible with the level of technology that we are led to believe existed at that time, according to our textbooks. The artifacts show a developed industry actually. Few centuries ago in Russia, while we are being told that it was a backwards country without any question of technology, even yet the artifacts show something completely different. You remember in St. Petersburg the Saint Isaac's Cathedral that probably we still cannot replicate, and it's still frame. And the authentic outfits of the people of that era did not show any signs of poverty. No, they dressed like queens and kings, not like beggars. And whatever building elements could not be destroyed by fires and other calamities in the history, the modern day restoration teams, they complete that job. This is how they mask whatever survival style art is left. Well, in this particular case, they have left a small window where one can get a preview of what is actually under the thick white layer of restoration. Well, restoration is even the wrong word. Masking is more correct. Now, one building survived in its original form and decoration, not exactly in Moscow, but this is Dmitrisky Sabor in the nearby city of Vladimir. And what is the official science telling us about this building? Oh, some foreigners came and built it, can't you see? It's in a Celtic or whatever style, it's not in local style. Well, that's the peak of shamelessness because this very same style of elements and also these griffins and so on, this is exactly the style that is found since the time of the Scythians on their golden items that I showed earlier in this episode, and it's also found in the ruble of Moscow and on all other artifacts of that time, like for example clothing, state symbols, etc. And it is essential to understand the seriousness of this problem. This is not a problem local to Russia. Russia is just one of the examples of what people found after they were alerted that their history is being stolen, and they just started looking around. For example, in my documentary called The Planet of the Megaliths, I show footage from Brighton Beach in New York, and there is a column, a European antique style looking column amongst the rubble of some sort of a gigantic megalithic city, it seems, because from what I last understand, this pile goes on for at least 200 kilometers. So I really hope that you're not getting bored because of too many of the examples I quote are from Russia. It's not because there is more history in Russia, at least till now we have no reason to consider so. The point is that people got aware about it here first, and everybody who follows in their steps will find the same thing in their own country. And I hope that I can turn my new website, megaliths.org, into some sort of international hub where such an information from various enthusiastic researchers from all over the world will be gathered at one place so that we can uh, connect this big puzzle as soon as possible of our real history, because we know very little. Maybe 1 or 200 years of the mainstream history is somewhat correct, and the rest requires serious revision. And no wonder that we see stuff like this in just normal villages famous with nothing in that region. This is seriously megalithic. Pyramids, Romaic style architecture, this shouldn't be there in case the official history was correct, and yet it is there. Supposedly, the stupid villagers living there didn't know what's happening in 3 villages away from theirs, yet they knew what kind of pyramids they built in Nubia. Still, many questions are awaiting their answer. For example, the survivor style cities, the very last wave that used some remnants of the technology of the survivors, they are there on all continents without exception. Now you see a collection of such cities, and so the question is, what kind of coverings, road cover did they use? According to mainstream history, in the best case scenario, in the most luxurious case, you get pavement, stones. But on the actual photographs, we see stones very rarely. Here the stones turn into something else. What is that else? It has to be manufactured somehow. Do you see the smooth streets? No mud, no vehicles that are getting stuck in, let's say, gravel, pebbles, or something like that. There was some sort of very neat and efficient covering. And on the top of that, the streets would remain very well leveled, and we don't see any. Now, this is an example of stone, really, but that's very little. Everything else is something else that doesn't form those uh, beds where the vehicles tend to pass more. That we see that even on the modern asphalt roads sometimes, not always, but sometimes. And yet in the past they had some sort of very nice idea of how to cover their roads, and pay attention to the very size of these roads. They are so well planned. We see some dirt on the top, but it's not much. You cannot say that this is a mud road. Definitely it's not. So nowadays we have central planning. We are paying traffic engineers, social engineers, and I don't know what else engineers. And at the end, we still get stuck for hours in traffic jams. and that is even in the newly built quarters of the cities. While people that we call less advanced than ourselves managed to make a much smarter layout of their roads, smarter and much more efficient. And at last I would like to show you some statues from the cemetery of the city of Lvov. This city has no mainstream history, just blank. They could not find any way to explain how could thousands of ordinary people that lived in a very ordinary place. This was not some posh rich center or a trade center or particularly rich area. How could these people afford such splendid statues for their graves? The cemetery is some 300 years old, I mean the oldest graves, and all of these statues are cast out of cement. Better than our cement, because our buildings fall apart in 100 years or so. But even the very technique of casting such beautiful things out of cement shouldn't have been known to some remote province. And also, why all these Romaic elements of architecture and outfits? Officially, such scenes should have been crossing the minds of sculptors and artists in a different place, Western Europe, and in a completely different time. All these antique-looking columns and other architectural elements of design are definitely cast out of cement in this case. And if people in this deep province knew about this technique, then why not suggest that it was used everywhere else where this Romaic style of architecture is prevalent? After having a look and even also taking some samples from some European stone castles, they don't look so much stone to me at all anymore. I don't know if I will find time to publish that research in a video, but I also actually asked the descendants of the very people who built the castles, and they swear up and down it's all done by a quarried stone. I asked them if there is any proof, like a record or some sort of sketches, plans of how it was built. No, everything has disappeared as usual. Although they have every small record of everything else, that is missing. And when I started asking many questions, they were like, well, what are you asking so much? There was no cement at that time anyway, so it cannot be built using casting technology. So that's their logic. They are really convinced that it must be stone because they absolutely believe that there could have not been anything else. Also in the Planet of the Megaliths, or maybe in the video of the Advanced Ancient Materials, I'm not sure which one exactly, I show some images from those amazing old churches in Armenia. They're also relevant to the topics in this episode because they show polygonal masonry, megalithic, and also some things that suggest casting. And on the top of that, we see the griffins and all the other elements that we saw earlier that were in the ruins of Moscow, and that the building of the Dmitrievsky Sobor that survived, and historians, so-called historians, are telling us that some sort of Celts or Goths must have come to build it because it's in their style. It's not their style, it's the survivor's style, and when they find it in an area where doesn't fit their Goths and Celts labels, they just bomb it or restore it or make up a funny story. It's time to find out our real history, I think. So far in the Survivors episodes, I have presented so much evidence that there is something very profoundly wrong with this so-called history of the textbooks that one would really need to wear blinders to still believe in that so-called history. They come also in convenient designs for humans, so don't you worry, you can get ones that suit your personality. See, this is so cool and modern, not so bad. You see, this man is so happy and he's even watching the History Channel. You can get a retro design as well, maybe in genuine leather. But in case you like the newer channel, I would just like to give a small tip how to get emails when I upload new videos, because that is no longer automatic. You can be subscribed, but you will not receive email updates immediately as I post videos unless you do this. Also, I still need help with my latest project, the website megaliths.org. The best would be somebody who has experience with PHP and interactive maps to help me with the scripts. Or alternatively, if somebody wants to donate, the donation button is found again on the homepage of megaliths.org, and those money will go towards maybe hiring a developer in case I don't find a volunteer. On this future website, megaliths.org, I would like to present systematically and hopefully on a map all the interesting sites that I feature in my videos, and many of them I haven't even featured yet, and yet tons of them are being sent to me daily by interested YouTube viewers. Some of them are precious, I can't even review them all, what to speak of putting them in videos.